if you do want to find your true self, you do have to make a huge sacrifice of some kind. We all want to know why we're here, what the purpose of our life is, and we all want to live our best life. We think we can figure out why we're here by finding our true self. Surely our true self will know the purpose of our life and will tell us what we need to do to live a fulfilling life. But can you ever really know or ever really find your true self? I'm inclined to say no. And I'm someone who actually values personal development and self actualization a lot. So, why would I say that you will probably never find your true self? Well, if you'd like to hear the answer to that question, stick around while Adam and I do our best to sort these questions out. But first, Adam's going to give the formal introduction to the show.
Hello and welcome to Settling's Not an Option. I'm Adam Nebbs and I'm here with my co-host Amanda Stanhope. This show is for anyone out there who feels like they've settled for an unfulfilling life, whether you've settled in a relationship, the work that you do, or how you feel about yourself. We're here to tell you that settling's not an option. If you're liking the show, please follow us on Spotify, Amazon Music, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have any feedback about the show or want to recommend a topic, you can also email us at cheers-to-not-settling@gmail.com. Finally, if you feel so inclined, you can donate to us on Ko-fi, where we're aiming to buy some new audio equipment. Okay, so the three questions we want to cover today, the first of which is, you change over time. So does your true self change too? Is it possible to find your true self when you live within a societal structure? And third, are you willing to make the sacrifices it takes to find your true self? So very small questions here from Snow today.
As usual. Very simple questions as usual.
Very simple. But I'll throw it to Amanda to start off the first one.
Yeah. So first I'll just say kind of how this episode came to be is that Adam and I have been having this discussion. Oh, yeah, set the timer. I heard your phone over there drop. All right, I have my timer set too.
Yep.
All right, so this episode came to be because we've been talking about this behind the scenes a lot, and I think it's fair to say we've both been feeling this way, but I have definitely been feeling not like myself, or like I have found myself thinking or saying, I'm just not feeling like myself lately. And one day it dawned on me that I'm like, who is this self that I'm supposed to be feeling like? And maybe that self doesn't even exist anymore. And so, my brain works that way, where I go down these rabbit holes of trying to figure out all the secrets of the universe. And so, Adam and I have been having these discussions. And so that's why we wanted to talk about it on the show and get some of our wisdom out there for everyone to enjoy. So with this particular question about changing over time, so we all know that we change as we grow. I mean, we physically change, our bodies change, our circumstances in life change, which can affect our behaviors, our thoughts, our feelings. So all of that can change, our priorities change. And so there's just so much change that you have to wonder what is changing and which of yourselves is changing. And when you say I've changed, does that mean your true self has changed? So that's the first question I'll pose to you, Adam. What do you think about that? Or what do you think about when
that's such an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's so easy to say, like, I don't feel like myself, but then if you really want to dig deep, you're like, what is the self?
Right.
Because even from a young age, like, it made me start to think about when I was at university doing sociology, and they were talking about the concept of socialization, which is, you've got your primary socialization where you're in the family unit and you kind of taught how to do things through the family.
Right.
Then I think it's secondary socialization where you go to school and the kids teach you what you're doing and the teachers. Then I think, there's that final layer, where you go out in the world and make friends and colleagues and, it changes you again. But the common thread throughout there really is, even from infancy, you're being molded by the people around you.
Sure.
And so, it's like you have to ask, it's like, when I say self, is my true self the self that was there, like as an infant before my parents started to mold me? Like, is that my true self?
Yes.
Because that's tricky, because you're an infant, and at that age, I can't remember when I was an infant, you were probably screaming and crying and,
Yeah.
demanding all your basic needs or whatever. It's like, so I don't think that's your true self. But yeah, from such a young age, we are kind of forced to adhere to our surroundings. Our parents will have their own different ways of, wanting us to be,
Right.
under the rules of the house or whatever it is.
Right.
Like, so it's really tricky. It's like, if I sit there and think about it, I'm like, what is my true self? I don't really know.
Yeah. Well, and how do you ever know? So like, even if you thought you found your true self, like, how do you really know? Like, there's not really ever any way to know. I mean, but let me back up. I think there are very few people who do figure it out, but I mean, they're few and far between. Like, I'm talking like saints or like yogic masters or Buddhist masters, or I don't know what they're called. I don't know what their titles are, but people who have kind of went through, well, what we'll talk about in the third question, they've gone through some kind of sacrificial process where I think it's possible to find your true self. But I mean, the majority of us, no, I don't think so. But I do think, to get back to, and I guess we'll talk about that in the third question, why we won't find our true self. But you were talking about the infant, and part of why I think there is a true self in us somewhere is because if you think back on babies, like, babies are born just with a certain attitude or a certain disposition, or like there's certain, especially certain babies, like, where you could tell they're not, not all babies act the same. They don't all do the same things. And some just have such a personality right from the day they're born. And that came from somewhere, so there is something in there that's like innate and born in us. And then I think it just gets buried under layers and layers and layers and layers of crap because of, like you said, you're so influenced by everything around you. But because I always think back, like, especially, there's two babies in particular, my daughter and my nephew. And like, just from day one, like, my daughter, she was just always super aware, like super independent. I mean, even like, she didn't really like to be held very much. Like, I mean, she just, like, from day one. And so she was one with a really strong personality. And then my nephew, he was one who just had this look in his eye. Like, you knew he was going to be a troublemaker. And like, he was cute. He knew he was cute, and he knew he was going to get away with being cute. Like, from day one, they had this. And so there has to be something in there, or else we would all just act the exact same way.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that, because I listen. I'd have to dig more into into this to find out, exactly what he was talking about. But there's a guy by the name of Donald Winnicott, and he was talking about how children need to know what their true self is before they can start adopting a fake self.
Okay.
So what he meant by that is, he's like, at that young age, a child needs to rebel. A child needs to just be selfish and go, I just, want to scream the house down. I want, mum and dad to give me everything I want. I want to be selfish. I don't want to think about anyone else's needs. I just want to, have that true self, I guess he calls it. And he's like, if they don't have that awareness that they can do that if they want to, then it means that when they adopt these fake selves later, so abiding by the rules of the household under mum and dad, or, doing the things you need to do in the office because it's, it's the right thing to do by the contract or whatever. It's like he said, people can get really, really sick. Like, it causes mental health issues, and it's really bad for you. So, and it was interesting hearing that.
Oh, sorry. Just if you haven't had that time to express your true self when you were a toddler, say, it can come over into your Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and it made me think about my daughter. So Amanda and I were just talking about my daughter's kind of going through a slightly rebellious stage where she's like learning how she can test me in a way, and what my response is to her new behaviors. And it's been really difficult for me. But then hearing that version, of the true self and a child being able to kind of, express their true self, it's made me think, okay, maybe it's not a bad thing if I let her kind of go through this stage of pushing back and going, I will be selfish and I won't think about the needs of the household. So not that I'll let that go on for too long, but I think, maybe it is a necessary part of development so that she is aware that she can be that way and express herself. So it's a tricky one, because I'm like, how do you do that in a healthy way? I don't know.
It's tricky, but that's a great point, because maybe that is why. So the question is, well, the main question of the episode is, can you ever really find your true self? And maybe that's a good reason that you can't, is because you weren't able to express. I think a lot of people are not able to express that part of themselves when they're young. I think it gets shut out right away. Like it will be cut off by your parents or your teachers or whoever very quickly, so you never get a chance to. But that's a tricky, that's a fine line too, because you can't let the kids run the household.
Yeah.
So that's a tricky one, but that's really interesting. And I'm sure that makes a lot of sense though, of how your true self ends up getting hidden. But, but I do think, so going back to the question of, does your true self change? I mean, obviously I don't know, but my theory is no. I think there is, and going back to like with the babies and everything, I think there is something in you that doesn't ever change. And so I feel like what I've kind of been thinking about as I've been going through this myself the past few months is all these changes, like if you think I've changed or I don't feel like myself anymore, I think that's all just part of the process of getting you back to your true self.
Yeah.
Because I think if you were your true self, you would not be changing. So if you're still changing, that's just a sign that you're still working on getting there.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like it can, which is probably why sometimes, and I know you and I have been through this recently, you do feel like you're going backwards sometimes. You're like, you feel like you've made all this progress, and then you kind of almost recede back into maybe some past behaviors or frustrations, but it's almost like a necessary part of getting back to what you originally were. Like I saw this quote, I think it was recently, and it was like, you spend the first half of your life trying to be an adult, and then the second half of your life learning to be a kid again.
That makes sense though.
I was like, that's true. Like I just think of all the things I've learned as I've come up through the world, which are all wrong. So, you and I now are spending our time going, sheesh, we've been programmed with all this incorrect information, and it's very hard, especially if you've been hearing this or practicing it for years on end. It's very hard to kind of go back to whatever it was before. So.
Well, yes. And you go back and forth, you make progress, you slide back, and you just find that balance. But all right, so we're ready for the second question?
Yeah, but I do agree with you that your true self doesn't change. I don't think it does.
I didn't let you comment on that.
Yeah, sorry.
But yes. Well, good. We're in agreement on something.
We're in agreement.
All right, so let's see here. Next question. Is it possible to find your true self when you live within a societal structure? So obviously we've talked about a little bit about that and covering the first question, and how, yes, we're constantly influenced by other people. We're told how to think, how to feel, how to behave, how to dress, how, all these things, because you think not even just the people in our lives, like direct people, like our parents, our teachers, friends, but all the advertising, and even just like textbooks, I guess that would be the teachers, but not even just the teachers, but the textbooks themselves. I mean, there are all these things that we are surrounded by all the time are shaping who we think we're supposed to be in order to live within the society. And of course, it makes sense because that's how we learn to navigate the world, is by mimicking other people, by observing particularly our parents or siblings or whoever we're around when we're young. And we observe them and we try to do what they're doing because that's just our unconscious survival instinct. And so that just but the thing is that carries over. Like, it doesn't just stop when we're kids. And because it's probably very necessary when you're a kid to do that and to mimic other people. Well, and actually, I'll bring it up later, but there is an American philosopher who I'll bring up a little bit later who says that mimicking in your adult life is good as well. But so I'm sure that there is it's very important, but it's hard to know, like you said, then you have your brain so programmed to be like other people. How do you know? And then that's where it gets tricky to know when you're just doing what someone else wants you to do and when you're doing what you want to do. So have you I know you found that in your own life, but
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. I've tried to mimic a lot of people. I mean, I'd say especially in the corporate world, like mimicking, like as a manager, trying to mimic other managers.
Okay.
But then finding that doesn't work because it's not authentically me and how I like to deal with people.
Right.
So it usually caused a conflict.
Right.
And, like in that manager capacity, it was about kind of finding who I wanted to be as a manager. And that's when I was at my best management style, which, took a long time. But yeah, you look at these other examples of role models, whether it's in the business world, influencers on Instagram, you do see them and think, well, look, they are doing well, they're famous or their team's doing really well at work. So if I imitate them, I'll do well. But, it doesn't work that way.
No. I mean, it is logical. I mean, it's very logical to think that way, but, well, and I guess, you might even have some success by doing that, but it's not necessarily the success that's going to make you feel happy or fulfilled or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, that's what I think it is. So it's not easy. I think, it is hard to kind of identify, well, what behaviors have I picked up over the years that have been by copying others? And how do I feel about those behaviors? And how can I make sure that my behaviors are consistent with how I want to live my life?
Right.
But it's quite a long process, quite a long journey. But I mean, because there's some superficial ways that you can, some superficial behaviors that you can observe, and you're like, okay, I know that that's not me. Like, for example, I see, I'm sounding old, but I see younger people, people like in their late teens, early 20s, running around and like being very loud or saying controversial things in a public setting, and they're just very much showing off, right? Like, and I laugh about it because I'm like, I remember doing that, just trying to show off.
Yes. Yeah.
And but it's not until you're an adult that you go, you're not doing that. Like, you're doing that to impress others, but you don't realize you're not impressing others at all. You're making yourself look like a bit of an idiot.
Right.
So there are those superficial behaviors where you go, why am I doing that? I still occasionally might modify my behavior in a setting because I think that's what the group wants me to do. And then I just end up looking like an idiot. And I'm like, I don't even like acting that way. What am I doing? So
I know, it's so unconscious though. It's just so built into you that you want to fit in. And you want to fit in so that you can survive, I guess, essentially. But then you forget, you're like, okay, but there's sometimes that I need to fit in to survive, and there's sometimes that I don't need to fit in to survive. So I will talk a minute about this quote I have here because it's pretty interesting. Think about it this way too. So this is from American philosopher George Herbert Mead, and I got this quote from Lumen Learning, so make sure to get the references in there. But he says that existence in a community comes before individual consciousness. First, one must participate in the different social positions within society, and only subsequently can one use that experience to take the perspective of others and thus become self-conscious. So it's like you have to try on all these different hats, to use like a pretty common saying. You have to try on all these different hats to see what one fits you, because you don't know from the start. So and that makes a lot of sense too. So that's why, like, he would say it's okay to mimic people, or to maybe, and that's how you found out. So in your case, like acting, you know, what's the word I'm trying to say? I can't think of it. I'm thinking of obscene, and obscene is not the right word, but you know, being loud and annoying in public. Once you did that and you felt stupid doing it, then you knew that wasn't a way that you want to act, but you don't know that until you try it, is basically what I'm saying. So it's like, I feel like you don't have to get down on yourself for trying to be like other people, you know, but you can, at some point, if you do want to find your true self, and if you do want to become self-actualized, or whatever other word you want to use, like at some point you have to step back and decide what behaviors of others you're willing to mimic and what ones you're not willing to mimic, like what ones really don't feel right to you. I think we all know what those are. I mean, we all know when a behavior or a thought or a feeling doesn't feel right to us. When a thought or a behavior doesn't feel right to us, we know. But I think we ignore it a lot of times because it's easier to ignore it.
Yeah, well, I do think you need to try all these different, you know, hats or different behaviors. Like, you know, it kind of ties into what we were talking about with, you know, Carl Jung's shadow, or the animus, or things like that. Like, I think it is really critical as a human being that you do explore those darker parts of yourself. Like, I saw like a commentary, I think it was on one of the Instagram accounts I follow, and it was a quote from Nietzsche.
Okay.
You know, just talking about like exploring the depths of yourself, you know, and you know how sometimes it's not safe to do so, you know, like you don't want to go too far and, you know, maybe start taking really illicit bad drugs, or, you know, living, you know, a crazy life of promiscuity or something like that. But you do need to explore those parts, you know, and I think even in the last 3 or 4 years, like I've had to explore some parts of myself that I suppose on the face of them, you know, might not kind of be in line with what I think is the best way of living, but like nonetheless, I wanted to explore them to understand myself better.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think you need to do that. You need to explore maybe those dark parts of yourself and recognize they're there, so that you can say, I know that they're there, and I've now just got to kind of live in a way that, you know, I guess, is authentic to me, but also acknowledges that I have those dark parts of myself, you know? So it's a tricky one. I think you do have to explore some stuff. I don't know if you've been in the same boat where you've had to kind of explore those parts.
Well, I don't know if I definitely have. And I'm sure there are some that I did intentionally, but I think some you just do unintentionally too. Like just like maybe like watching a horror movie or something, or watching not even necessarily a horror movie, but an action movie where people are getting killed every 5 seconds, or even watching like a love story, or like softcore porn or something, or you know, where you're like, that's exploring your dark side in a way.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's a way of trying on another hat or not, but but I mean, it is kind of like you're living vicariously through those characters. People. So I mean, I do think that's one way. And then you also know, okay, that's not how I want to live my life.
Yeah.
Or maybe
True.
it is. I don't know. Maybe that you find out that that is your true self. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a great point though, as far as because society, I think that is also another reason why. So the question was, can you become or can you find your true self when you're living within a societal structure? Well, so a societal structure tries to keep you away from exploring your dark side, really, for the most
Yeah.
part. Although, I mean, I say that there's a lot of things that are kind of dark that are allowed, but you know what I mean? Like, mostly they try to push you toward being a good person or being a good citizen, contributing to society, like it's trying to push you to that side of yourself and not promoting the dark side of yourself so much. So
Yeah.
that probably is a reason why it is so hard.
Yeah.
Find your true
Well,
self. Yeah.
well, that's it. I think, yeah, it's this. I think we've kind of covered the issue, in a few past episodes, but just the fact that society is designed by the power players really to stop you from self-actualizing or stop you from finding your true self, because they don't want people
Right.
who are, who are kind of awakened, I guess, or
Yeah.
actualized, because then those people start bucking against
Right.
the trends of society, and
Right.
stop buying things to
Right.
satisfy themselves.
Exactly.
So, I think it is possible to find your true self in a societal structure, but you need to appreciate that it'd be so much harder. Like, I don't know, maybe living in a cabin in the woods far away from everyone else, maybe you would find your true self. I don't know. Like,
I don't
we
know.
haven't done it.
I didn't really want to do that, so I'm not going to find out.
But yeah, I just think, yeah, you need to acknowledge the fact that society is designed in a way to keep you doing certain things because it's how people who are very wealthy want you to be.
That's true. And I mean, one last thing I'll say about that. I mean, there are certain things that are helpful. I mean, if you are going to live with other people, it is helpful to act in certain ways at certain times.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a fact. So, but just realize that that might not be your true self acting that way.
Yeah, true.
All right. So, question number 3. Are you willing to make the sacrifices it takes to find your true self? Because that is the question. Because I do think that is really what it takes. If you do want to find your true self, you do have to make a huge sacrifice of some kind.
Yeah.
I don't think there's I mean, anybody I've listened to or read about or whatever, like anybody who's maybe gotten close to knowing them true selves or maybe gotten as close as they could, they all went through some kind of crazy sacrifice. It's not like they had an easy life, they all have these crazy backstories that when you hear it, you're like, holy cow, I would have never guessed that. Or I can't believe that you made it through all of that. And so, yeah, this is the quote from Jordan Peterson, of course, because, I always had to bring up Peterson or Maslow.
Yep.
So Jordan Peterson said, you have to be willing to lose your life in order to find it. And that's really been sticking with me. And I guess that kind of goes back to maybe like taking off all those layers of yourself that society has put on you too, is that you have to lose all of that in order to find yourself. And that's really hard to do because that would feel so, it feel so unsafe, uncertain, and just, it's just plain hard. And, we all have so many things going on in our lives on a daily basis that we're trying to manage, that, taking on something that's hard is not something that most of us are willing to do. I mean, most people can't even ignore their phone when it's going off, and so it's like, how can we expect that most of us are going to be able to make a huge sacrifice, the type of sacrifice that it was required to find our true self?
Yeah.
I say, I don't think there's too many people that are going to do that.
No, I don't think so. I mean, that's the whole purpose of the show, really, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
even in the intro, we talk about, settling in a relationship, settling in the work you do, how you feel about yourself.
Yeah.
Like, we could think of 3 examples there. It's like, I know quite a few people that are in relationships that are not happy, but they're scared. It's like, if I am no longer in this relationship, who am I? I'm going to have to go and find who I really am, because, quite often in relationships, it's a nice little refuge where you can hide in it, hide in the relationship and not actually find who you really are. So you have to do that. Also, usually you'll have a house together, you might have kids together. So people are like, oh, I do not want to face what's on the other side because I don't know what it is. Like, I'd rather suffer through this really crappy relationship, but be certain of what I'm facing, as opposed to maybe it'll be great out there, but I don't know. It's uncertain.
But you got to make all that sacrifice first. You have to go
and
sacrifice. Yeah.
Same in work. I hate my job. I complain to all my friends about my job, but it's good money. I feel secure. I don't know what's on the other side. And even before the show, Amanda and I were talking about the way that people see themselves. That they might adopt a victim mentality or something like that. And if they were to free themselves of that victim mentality and explore, okay, well, is this really how things are? Am I really the victim in all of these situations, or do I need to look inside and find that maybe I'm responsible for some of the things I'm doing? But again, it's like the thought of losing that victim status means, well, who am I going to be? I don't know what's on the other side. So people are terrified to actually sacrifice something.
Well, and it is scary. And I think it's just important to talk about, because I feel like there's a lot of pressure on people to find their true selves, or I don't know. And it's probably because of the media that I consume, because I consume a lot of personal development, podcasts or videos or books or whatever. So it's probably just the world that I am in, that there's all these messages about finding yourself and finding your purpose, and and it's like, it feels like something that everybody's expected to be able to do. And I think it's important to realize that it's not easy, and we should not expect to be able to do it. Now, I do think we should work toward it, and I think we can get a little closer, but to ever think that you're ever gonna really know, unless, like I said, unless you're willing to do something crazy, like okay, so here's my one example, because I've been watching, did you know David Goggins?
Yeah, I haven't watched any of his stuff though.
So he so for those that don't know, so he was a Navy SEAL. Well, first of all, before he was a Navy SEAL, he was very overweight. I think he said he weighed like 300 pounds and was working like a blue collar type job and whatever, and just he did, that's the life he had chosen at the time. And then one day he saw like a Navy SEAL advertisement and decided that's what he wanted to do. So he goes from this guy just living this kind of what he calls like a mediocre life, overweight and everything, becomes a Navy SEAL. Took him 3 times to get through it, but he finally became a Navy SEAL. And now he's just like he's like the most self-disciplined, craziest dude that I've ever heard. I mean, because now he runs like 100-mile, what are they called? They're called like, not super marathons, but
ultra marathons.
He does like these 100-mile races. I think he did a 150-mile race once, but I heard him talking about how to qualify for that, he had to run 100 miles in 24 hours or less. And he was talking about how he had like stress fractures, and he had like all this stuff going on. I think he like had kidney failure at one point. Like seriously, like this dude is literally killing himself. Okay, so fast forward now, and he still does all this stuff, but I also heard him talking about how he thinks he's the happiest person alive, because he's been through hell and back. He's broken himself. He's went to the edge. He knows what he can handle. And he's not afraid of anything, because he said he's never afraid of what's on the other side of the door, because he knows whatever it is, he can face it. So that's what it takes to find has he found his true self? I think he probably has. Do I want to go through all that to find my true self? No, I do not.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
I mean, but that's just a prime example of, and some people will probably say he's insane, but whatever. But I mean, that's the type of level of sacrifice I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Where you're really pushing yourself to your absolute limits to see what you're made of. So
Yeah.
I can tell you I'm
I
never going to be doing that. So I'm okay with
No.
part of myself.
Yeah, I'm with you on
I don't
that.
want to settle, but at the same time, I don't need to go that far.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know, because there are many opportunities in life where you could do some really confronting things.
Yeah.
But part of me is like, I just don't want to go through it. I just don't want to go through it.
Well, and sometimes you just weigh the cost and the benefit, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
And maybe we would be happier. I mean, he says he's the happiest person on earth. So, I mean, I don't know. He doesn't ever seem very happy. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen him smile. Because I've watched quite a bit of footage of him over time. And I'm not so sure I've ever actually seen him smile, but you know, he says he's happy. So if he says he is, who might argue with that?
So is that maybe the sign of a truly happy person? They don't smile. Maybe we just think smiling means you're happy, but
right, exactly.
You know, there's a lot of people who smile, I suppose, that aren't happy. Like, you know, you always see that big picture of, you know, all those comedians, Anthony Bourdain and Robin Williams, and they're all smiling, and it's like, this is the face of depression. So maybe we've just been conditioned to smile a lot when we're not happy. Whereas old Dave Goggins, he's like, I'm not smiling.
I don't need to prove to you that I'm happy. I know I'm happy.
Yeah, exactly. I'm happy inside.
That's probably what he would say. He would say that.
Yeah. But that's interesting. Very interesting.
But yeah, he's a very interesting guy to listen to. You got to kind of take it with a grain of salt and kind of dial it back, because you're like, okay, you can kind of feel overwhelmed by his message sometimes.
Yeah.
He's a great one to listen to. But I do know in the times that I've made what I would call a sacrifice, which my sacrifices were like very small compared to that. But the times that I've had to sacrifice something, like one prime example was when I went through my divorce. And I had to change a lot of things about my life. And that when I've gone through those periods, I have grown exponentially. I mean, within that, just the amount of change and emotional maturity and strength and just all this that you gain in that period of time when you're going through something like that is exponential. So I do believe, I mean, that proves to me that that is what it takes to find yourself. But my sacrifices, you know, really, if I think about it, not that big of a deal, because even during that time, yes, my life changed a lot, but I still had my family, I still had my friends, I still had a job, I still, you know, like, it wasn't like my whole world collapsed, even though it kind of felt like it at the time. So I can't say that I've ever really been through a true sacrifice either. I've made small sacrifices.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think? Do you feel like you've ever made like a true sacrifice?
Well, no, I'd be in the same boat as you. Like, I was just thinking, you know, on LinkedIn, like I've seen a few people, I suppose, who I wouldn't say they've made a sacrifice, but they've had like a life-altering event that's completely changed, you know, who they were and helped them see who they are. Like, there's a lady I follow who had an accident, and she's in a wheelchair now, and she's like, it's really changed her perspective on life. And I heard, you know, somebody talking about Christopher Reeves the other day, and you know, how after his accident on the horse and all that stuff, how it completely changed his life and how he talked about things. So like, yeah, I feel like those are life-altering events, which seem to, in a way, just change somebody and maybe help their true self, maybe accelerate the process that could have happened if those events hadn't happened, but it accelerates them. But yeah, for me, like the big one, like you, was when, you know, I separated from my wife, and I, until that stage, was very like, you know, dependent on the relationship to kind of helped me understand who I was. Like it was, I was the relationship. I wasn't an independent person.
Right.
So, you know, it was really hard coming out the other side of that because I was like, who am I? So I desperately tried to find another person to be with so that I could be like, oh, I don't want to confront this question. So I'll just get with another person and we're sorted. But it wasn't until that I started to feel comfortable in myself that started to emerge.
Yeah.
And that was another thing I wanted to say is like we are, you know, we've got so many titles in society.
Yeah.
And you know, if you become to if you kind of identify with those titles too much, that can be really damaging for you. So I even think about like the title I've got at the moment of PhD student.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really struggling at the moment because, you know, it's not going the way I want it to. I feel like, you know, I'm struggling with imposter syndrome a lot. You know, so that title for me doesn't really match how I feel. So I'm really struggling with that.
Yeah.
You know, so that's why I think people have just got to be aware that yourself is such a complicated thing. It could never be boiled down to, you know, PhD student or parent or, you know, accountant or whatever. Like,
right.
Yeah, you're so much deeper than that. And it's such a complicated thing, which is hard to find. So I think that's answering your question. I probably got on a tangent.
No, that's a great point. But it also made, when you said it's complicated, it made me think, is it complicated? I'm almost thinking, because we've been talking about how difficult it is, blah, 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 and it is difficult to find your true self, I believe, just because of the way our brains work. But I think it's probably very easy, but we make it complicated.
Yeah,
it's probably super simple. It's probably the simplest thing in the world, but we just can't do it because our brains want to make it more complicated than it is.
I think that's it. That's the one. Yep.
It's probably the simplest thing ever.
We like making things complicated.
Yeah, because you think about it. Okay, so even obviously like monks and saints and those people like live a simple life usually.
Yeah.
And I would say those people have gotten pretty close to finding their true selves, probably. And even with David Goggins, his life is pretty simple. He is a Navy SEAL and he does more than that, I'm sure. But the things that have like changed him or broken him or whatever, as he would say, those were pretty simple things. You know, really.
Yeah.
Just go run for 24 hours. That's pretty simple. It's not easy, but it's simple.
No, you're right. We want to make it bigger because in our minds it's like, surely to achieve something as great as the true self, you must do, I don't know, we watch too many movies. You've got to go through like an Indiana Jones style, you know.
We're going like, to crusade.
Yeah, I think so. Like you have to do that to get the prize, whereas that's probably half the issue is that we don't realize it's so much easier than that.
No, I'm glad we kind of came to the conclusion because I wasn't even thinking about that before. But I think that makes so much sense that, it's there. We're just making it more complicated than it needs to be.
Yep.
So that's the thing. If you want to try to find your true self, we'll end it on the episode on that note. If you want to try to find your true self, stop trying to find your true self.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
Come to you. So.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
All right. So I'll do our formal wrap up.
Yep.
All right. So if you made it this far, you're still watching, still listening, we really appreciate it. And we'd also really appreciate if you could show us some support by liking the episode, commenting on it, sharing it, whatever you feel comfortable doing. We would appreciate it. You can also jump over to Ko-fi and donate as little as $1 to help us keep things going. You can email us at cheerstonotsettling.com. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music. I think that's everything. So we'll say until next time, cheers to not settling.
Cheers to not settling. Bye.